10-year Bollywood career, John Abraham has defied a few trends. His transition from a supermodel to an A-list star has been pretty smooth. But it is his avatar as producer that has got people sitting up and taking notice. Last year, John Abraham Productions' first film, Vicky Donor, was the sleeper hit of the year and also won the film 3 national awards.
मेरा नाम Manya Surve.
His next release, Shootout at Vadala, has him playing the real-life gangster Manya Surve, a daredevil whose death was the first recorded encounter in the history of Mumbai's underworld. On the A-list today, John says that Manya Surve will finally get people to acknowledge John Abraham, the actor.
Bombay ka naya baap, Manya Surve!
John, thanks so much for being on the A-list.
Thank you.
To start out with Shootout at Vadala, the movie that's coming up for release. You know, honestly, when you look at Manya Surve, and if I was ever in charge of casting for a film, you wouldn't be my first automatic choice for it, for obvious reasons.
Nor would I.
Okay.
Yeah.
But for different reasons. So, were you surprised that this role came to you?
Well, I was in fact instrumental in choosing the kind of film that we made right now, in fact, with Sanjay Gupta. All credit to him for choosing this character, but we were in unison when we chose this.
Okay.
But when we chose it, I really wasn't the first choice in my head for myself as Manya Surve. I honestly believe that it's a role that was very difficult to carry off, but not impossible. And I knew that as an actor, I needed to have the guts to make that drastic change to make sure that I succeed in a role like this.
Yeah.
And I worked hard for it.
But you know, how tough is it to play someone who's a living person? Okay, we don't know much about him except the written word, but what kind of creative license you take to interpret him, or do you do some sort of prep on how he looked, how he spoke like, what was he like, or can you take creative license because this is not really someone that we've seen?
Yeah.
You know?
I don't know whether you read Domri to Dubai,
Yes,
but if you read that, Manya Surve is just one small chapter in that book.
Yes.
And there are only 2 file photographs of his, if you've seen the book. One's a passport size photograph of his, and the other is a photograph post the encounter with 9 bullets in his body.
Yes.
There was nothing much that we could do with that. So we met people who knew him. Sanjay Gupta actually, and myself, we met his cousins, we met people around who spoke to us about what he was like. We met the gentleman who killed him in an encounter, Mr. Isaac Bhagwan, who is actually very closely associated with Anil Kapoor through the entire film. And I remember Sanjay telling me one thing very interesting, because Sanjay's first meeting with Isaac Bhagwan, where he said, Sanjay asked him, tell me about yourself. In the 2 hours that Mr. Bhagwan spoke, I think for 1 hour 50 minutes he spoke about Manya Surve.
Okay.
And that's what Sanjay told me was very impressive. We learned a lot about what he was like. We knew that Manya Surve was a Mumbai Shri. He was a bodybuilder.
Oh,
he was a tough guy.
Okay.
He was ruthless, and he used to roam around alone. He had 12 gang members, and none of his 12 confidants knew where he lived in 4 years that he ruled Mumbai from 79 to 82. The only person that gave him away was the woman he was in love with.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's what makes the story very moving and exciting, and one of the reasons why we wanted to do this.
Just like a Hindi film.
Just like a Hindi film.
Yeah.
This is a commercial Hindi film.
Yeah.
But it's not a documentary. At the same time, we've been inspired by true life incidents, but we fictionalized a lot of the film. You know, just to tell you why names have changed, etc.
Yeah.
My director, my studio did not want to get into any controversies. They've changed everyone's name around because they fictionalized all the characters except mine.
Okay.
That's why Manya Surve stayed as Manya Surve in the entire film. So it was a very difficult film for me to do, but challenging, fun, and I knew that if I carry this film off, the perception of people around me about what John Abraham is as an actor, or what John Abraham is as a star, would completely change. It would take a complete 180, 360 across.
But how important is that assessment? Like, where does that assessment come from? Is it from reviews? Is it from critics? Is it from...
I'll tell you where it comes from. The audience, my audience is my godfather. They love me. I wouldn't have lasted here 10 years if I wasn't doing something right. I love them too. but I also feel that there is time for progression and graduation. And I feel John Abraham was getting too comfortable in his boots, in a Dhoom, in a Dostana, in a Desi Boys. He's always known as the body, the cool urban actor.
Urban, yeah.
My performances, which I think were amongst my best, were No Smoking, Zinda, Taxi 911, Water. These are performances that are New York that I was very proud of. But a lot of them, are always put behind because of the physicality that comes forward. So to answer your question, it's not as much as the reviews as much as it is myself that needed to make a change. I decided to make a change, and I'm happy that Shootout at Vadala fell in my lap. Education gives you the power of choosing the right from wrong. And I believe it gives me a lot of self-confidence and a lot of self-expression and a feeling of self. And that's something I can't lose. And that's why I've hung around for so long.
Coming back to Manya Surve, are you playing him as a hero or as an anti-hero? What in your head is he when you look at his positioning?
Yeah, one thing Sanjay Gupta and me were both clear on is that we're not going to glorify gangsters.
Yes.
So we're very clear about that. We've shown Manya Surve exactly as he was in real life. He was a lower middle class Maharashtrian boy from Kirti College, and all he wanted to do was educate himself, and he read books on philosophy. I mean, Manya Surve was a very smart guy, and he wanted to become an engineer, and that's it. And circumstances, as you see in the film, because the less I say, the better.
No spoilers, yeah.
But circumstances got him to become a gangster, and life changed for him. I think we've played Manya Surve exactly how my director envisioned the fact that he needed to be played as. We needed to show a progression of Manohar Arjun Surve, the sweet Maharashtrian boy from college, to Manya Surve when he gets out of college. So his gait, his tonality of his language, how it changed, how his sweet Marathi becomes crass, when he gets out, how the texture in his voice changes, how his whole physicality changes when he gets out. So we've shown the entire progression, which is why we took a year to make this film.
Okay.
So we've used that, we've really put in a lot of effort into this film.
No, and it's interesting you said that you don't want to glorify a life of crime or a criminal, but when you put it in a mainstream movie and it's a charismatic star like you who's playing the role, is there a danger of it getting glamorized? I mean, that's different from glorifying it. That when you have those crowd-pleasing dialogues, there's someone like you playing it, there these, it's a big film. Is that an issue that you think about?
It's not an issue, Yes, there are dialogues that are larger than life. And we played to the galleries with the dialogues, and we have item songs in the film. So we are not apologetic about the fact that it's a commercial film. So we don't have an issue with it getting, with the film getting glamorized or commercialized rather. But I think the one person who will walk away with all the credit is Sanjay Gupta in this film, because he's made sure that he doesn't glamorize gangsters per se. And that's something that comes across through the entire film. With a lot of help from actually Hussain Zaidi, who had written the book. So Hussain Zaidi was there through the entire shoot, and he gave his input. So we've really not glorified this guy at all. We've shown him as rustic, as ruthless, rough. There are points at time in the film where you'd really hate this guy for the way he treated the woman in his life. So there's no sense of heroism there. When you treat a woman badly, there's no sense of heroism. But the language with which he talks to that woman, the way he treats her, is not very becoming of a man. So we've shown it as it is.
How do you feel about the character? When you've lived with something for so long, worked on it for a year, done your prep and all, how do you feel about Manya Surve today? Do you like him? Do you feel it was a life wasted? Do you understand him? How does it work for you? It's always interesting when you play someone else.
Yeah, I honestly believe had he been alive, he would have changed the course of history in this country as far as gangs went, and as far as who ruled Bombay at that point of time. Manya Surve was a very, very intriguing character. He roamed around with a knife and a pistol and a 50 ml bottle of acid, and that's all he had. He had no guards around him. He had no one, and he operated alone. He had 12 people around him
Yeah.
as informers, as friends. Sheikh Munir was his best friend. But he was very clear that he had to operate alone. Very intriguing character. I know someone, I know a friend, and this is a very interesting story. I must tell you this. And this is in Khira Nagar in Santa Cruz. There's a place called Khira Nagar. My friend was really little and young, and he lived in these chawls, you know, that were not really shanty, but like houses. One fine morning, he gets a knock on the door, and he's so little, so he stands in front of his mother, and the mother opens the door, and there's a gentleman standing in front with an orange tika and a Sai Baba here, and he says, "Namaskar, Dhabholkar khute hai." Where's Dhabholkar? And the mother says, "You've, knocked the wrong door. Dhabholkar lives in the next." Dhabholkar was his cop,
Okay.
and the guy standing across was Manya Surve.
Okay.
And this is my friend telling me, because he looked up and he saw Manya Surve, this massive mountain of a guy. And behind him, while he was talking, his gang members were going and locking all the doors across.
Okay.
And this is how he operated. At the minute he found out that Dhabholkar didn't exist, wasn't there in the house, he just put his hand up and they started unbolting all the doors across. And that's how things existed in
Do you have the
79.
scene in the movie? You should
We don't have the scene, but I'm telling you, this
But
is a
this
true
is the
life.
backstory.
But this is just the tip of the iceberg. So what we've shown in the film is, you can imagine what we must have shown in the film. We've really dramatized a lot, but this is the way Manya Surve was. And he folded his hands in front of the lady, he said, "Thank you."
Okay.
And he left respectfully. And this is this little boy who's now grown up who told me
And
this
he
entire
still
story
has this, yeah.
about Manya Surve. So I asked him, I said, "What is it about him that caught your eye?" He said he was extremely well spoken and he was extremely respectful. So Manya Surve was actually a chameleon. He would change when he had to. He would actually speak lines from Sigmund Freud. He would actually get into a saying.
Yeah.
He'd actually talk about something very philosophical, and suddenly he'd break into a very ranty,
Yeah.
hardcore, abusive, way of speaking to someone around when he had to. But that was Manya Surve for you. So I found it very, very intriguing.
He is also an educated gangster who would read James Hadley Chase, and you
Yeah, you really
you are an educated film star.
Yeah.
So how is that? And I remember long back you told me that's something that keeps you grounded. I mean, education helped
Absolutely.
Manya Surve in other ways.
Yeah.
But for you've told me many times that it's something that keeps you grounded. Do you still hold? Do you still
I
maintain
mean,
that?
think of it. I mean, I was just talking to your colleague, and he said, "John, it's so difficult that in the 10 years you've been here, you've managed to stay away from camps. You've managed to hold your own. And today you're producing films, and your films are working. And it all stems out of education, because education gives you the power of choosing the right from wrong. And I believe it gives me a lot of self-confidence and a lot of self-expression and a feeling of self. And that's something I can't lose. And that's why I've hung around for so long. When you're educated, being a marketing person, I've positioned myself in the mind of my consumer as John Abraham the biker, John Abraham the football player, John Abraham the fitness fanatic, John Abraham who believes in content-driven cinema. Be it as an actor, he may do commercial stuff,
Yeah.
like a Houseful 2, like a Race 2. But as JA Entertainment, his production house, he's very clear. He'll do a Vicky Donor, he'll do a Madras Cafe, he'll do films that are very different. So I think education has helped me to a very, very large extent.
Also, your positioning, like again, staying with the Manya Surve parallel. He was the outsider who didn't get admission into any of the gangs. So somewhere he became the outsider insider. So for you, is that your positioning? I mean,
You won't believe me if I say this, but I've used my relationship and my status in the film industry exactly the way I drew analogies, and I used that with Manya Surve's character out there.
Okay.
To a
So
large,
I'm on the right track.
Yeah, you're on the right track to a large extent, because Manya Surve was a complete outsider. He wasn't accepted in the gang for obvious reasons, and then he started his own gang, and he decided to rule Bombay. So I think I hope I rule one day, but I hope I don't meet the end he met. You may get critically bashed or critically appreciated, but there's something that John Abraham has done that has got him till here. But is John Abraham satisfied with that? Not at all.
even though you're now an astute businessman and you have GA entertainment, you basically think from the heart too? You go by gut and instinct?
I go by gut completely. I think from the heart, but my head rules a lot of my business decisions. I'm a smart investor, and I make no qualms about saying that because I am a very middle class person in my head. So for me, 1 rupee is 100 paisa. So I make sure I save every penny. I know the mileage on my car. I know the ration amount that's spent in my house every month. I know my electricity bills. I know every little detail of my outgoing. So I'm a guy who balances my own sheets.
Okay.
So I'm so very clear about things I do.
So for you then, gut instinct is all well and good. Commercial viability is also a parameter.
Absolutely, which is why as an actor, I pick up scripts that probably do what you popularly call the 100 crore business, etc.
Yeah.
So I've hit that marquee twice with 2 films, but I don't think that there's a sense of achievement there because I really believe that there are only 2 kinds of films, good films and bad films.
Okay.
And it's not necessary that all good films translate into 100 crore films. And it's also not necessary that all bad films fail.
Are people now confused about audience sensibilities? You're a producer, you're an actor. There is a high concept film like Vicky Donor which does really well, gets you critical acclaim, 3 national awards. And then there are, like you said, the 100 crore films which don't seem to have any concept but do really well. So does that confuse you about what the audience wants?
Not at all. I'm very clear. Being a marketing person, I'm very clear about audience segmentation, understanding who my audience is. And I know what film caters to what audience. And as long as you're clear about that, you do a film catering to that audience. That's it. It's very easy as an actor to get confused.
Yeah.
But if you know what audience you're catering to, you're not confused in your head. It's as simple as that.
You sound completely like the media planner that you were.
Absolutely.
You still work with Excel sheets and PowerPoint presentations also?
You won't believe there was a time I couldn't do without an Excel sheet. I'm so conversant with working on it that sometimes my hands itch, But everything that I want to do has to be a PowerPoint presentation and everything. And people say, relax, just chill. And I say, no, it has to be a presentation. But we're very proud of ourselves and I really want to brand myself as someone who thinks differently. And I believe that's the only way I can survive. I'm a biker. At the end of the day, I take the off-road. I'll never be, if the road's too smooth and everything's fine, then there's a cause for concern for me. I need to take the off-road.
But in a nutshell, what is the brand then?
I think right now it's content. It's about content, J Entertainment is about content-driven cinema. J Entertainment is about cinema where we make films and not proposals. So we create our own stars. And for me, the star of the show is always the content.
You learn a lot from success. Everyone learns a lot from success, but failure also teaches you a lot of things. What is the one failure or 2 failures that has taught you something? Even when it comes to brand building that we've been talking about, usually a brand failure teaches you a lot more than the success of something. So is there any lesson that you've learned from?
I think you should learn only from your failures.
Okay.
And I've had enough of them in my life to learn from. And I think each time I've always picked up a certain reason as to why, and I've always tried to do that. I've always tried to analyze, do a post-mortem in a very analytical manner, not an emotional manner, and understand why a film has failed or why I have failed with a certain brand. And I put the 2 and 2 together and I understand what the intersection is. And I try and negate that intersection from the remainder of the set. Okay. You understand? So failure number 1 happens. Yeah. Failure number 2 happens, you intersect and you understand that this intersection is your common reason for failure. So
Venn diagrams, almost like Venn
diagrams. So when you create your next set or subset or however you look at it, you try and make sure that that intersection doesn't exist. Or if you do create a project or a proposal here and another proposal here, you make sure that they're mutually exclusive from each other. So you have to be very sure about that.
So you make it sound like a science and
it is all a science. Fitness is all a science. Creativity at the end of the day is science. Religion is science, and I believe everything is science.
But acting is an art.
Acting is an art. Acting is either you honestly, there's something you have to do that's right for the audience to like you, because you may get critically bashed or critically appreciated. But there's something that John Abraham has done that has got him till here. But is John Abraham satisfied with that? Not at all. He needs to go far ahead to really broaden his bandwidth of an audience and also the bandwidth of his level of performances.
And I think Anurag Kashyap had said this during No Smoking, that you are as good as your director. Do you still believe in that?
I completely believe in that, and I say this on record. There is no good or a bad actor. There's a good or a bad film, and I always mention this. There are films that I have done that I'm disastrous in, but I would never hold it against my director. It's my choice of my director and my film that's let me down. Okay. There are films that I think I've done exceptionally well in. And I say this without any reason of doubt, I say this. And I really give all credit to my director. So if Shootout does well, I will not take credit for it because I'm not responsible for it. It's my director who's seen that vision and who's seen me in that space. No one can see John Abraham as Manya Surve, but Sanjay Gupta did. So let's see what Sanjay Gupta does with John Abraham in Shootout at Vadala.
We'll look forward to that. Thank you so much, John, for being on the A-List.
Thank you.